All right, welcome to week 3 for Warfare in Society in Pre-Modern and Early Europe. This week's lesson is titled From Legion to Legend, and we're going to be looking at the transitional time period from the fall of the Roman Empire to the medieval time period. The focus of this week is going to be how the Roman centralized system fell apart and how individualized heroics came to take its place as warrior elite came to be the leaders rather than professionals that had been seen in the Roman army. This is a key turning point in European warfare. Over the course of a few centuries, Europe's going to go from a centralized model where the disciplined legions of the Roman Empire dominated the world to a decentralized world dominated by warrior elites. You're going to see a shift from civic responsibility to personal bonds of loyalty, heading into the feudalism of the High Middle Ages. You're also going to see a shift towards violence with a sacralization or a religious component, and violence that is justified through other means. In the Roman time period, the violence is justified as part of civic duties, that it's all for the glory of the Republic, later the Empire. Now violence serves a more personal need or possibly even a religious need. Just a reminder of readings that needed to be done. You should be in chapters 4 through 6 of the main course book, and chapters 1 through 3 of our medieval military book. So those readings will be able to help you with this week's essay assignment, where you'll be comparing the two systems of the Roman army and the early medieval society. Just a quick look back and a reminder of the Roman army. Armstrong and Fronda from our main book remind us that the Roman legion is not just a tactical unit on the battlefield. It's an instrument of social cohesion and identity for these soldiers. Military service was deeply tied into Roman citizenship. Soldiers were able to own land. They were able to have a fairly decent status within the Roman standing of society. There was money to be gained, spoils to be had, and they also got a say during the Republic era. So it's not just the elites that dominate the Roman warfare, as you would see in the medieval time periods. It was a shared responsibility for citizens. The legions were standardized and professionalized, especially after the Marian reforms. The term Marius's mules is thrown around a lot as he developed standards that each soldier had to adhere to for their physical fitness and their condition and their ability to serve in the military. His reforms, though, also enabled the recruitment of landless citizens, which greatly expands those who are able to serve and takes it away from the elites. The army is now more permanent. It's centrally funded. It's rigorously drilled, which I want you to hang on to that concept of drilled. It's something we'll come back to later. And it's most importantly, in comparison to these later models, it has sophisticated logistics and support. There is a quartermaster corps, for lack of a better term, within the Roman army. There is logistics, there is navy, there is differentiation of units, and there is even siege and fortification works within the Roman army. And so that's something that will be extremely different from the warrior elites that we'll see in early medieval. One of the things that Fronda and Armstrong emphasize is that even the commanders and the elites were expected to, in theory, we understand that it's theory, not all commanders, and especially not the emperors, did this, but they were expected to set aside and subordinate their personal ambitions to the needs of the state. And that's something that's very, very different from the medieval society, where you'll see that a lot of times warfare is all about the personal ambitions of the leader and what his followers are willing to go along with. Another thing to point out is that the legions had manuals. The legions had codified system of discipline. That level of organization, that again, drill, we want to go back to that word, enabled the Roman army to maintain long campaigns and therefore large-scale conquests. The Roman soldiers didn't have to go back to plow the field or to gather the crops in like later soldiers will. And so they had a true system. By the time of Rome's fall in 476 AD, the structural supports of the Roman military had eroded. Baccarat explains in Warfare in Medieval Europe, the collapse of Roman authority led to the disintegration of centralized institution. Without a unified tax base, imperial logistics are gone, the road structure starts to decay, and the provinces are really kind of left to fend for themselves. They become their own little hamlets of stability in a world that's very quickly falling apart. It's often what we call the Dark Ages. Really, it's the beginning of the medieval time period because you're going to see many of the same themes that occur for the next 1,000 years, but it gets the term the Dark Ages as Roman light falls apart. What is very clear here is the scale of warfare shrinks. Where Roman armies could put sometimes thousands, tens of thousands of men on a battlefield for a single large engagement, now you're going to be in the hundreds, sometimes just the dozens of soldiers in raids to get cattle, to get slaves, just to prove a point that you could to the other local strongman. And so you're going to see a shrinking of warfare, and you're also going to lose that professionalism, and you're going to see a lack of drill and standardization, especially in weapons, armor, and training. So during this time period, especially under the Merovingians and the Carolinians on the continent, and the Saxons in England, you're going to see the rise of the warrior lord. This is also the time period of Arthurian legend. The great man with his named sword doing great deeds, right? And so this is that time period. The Carolinian system, which Baccarat delves into for a lot, revolves around the military elites, heavily armed warriors riding their horses, and then those who are bound to them through oaths of loyalty and rewarded with land and privilege for serving them with honor and with recognition. This warrior elite would become the nobility of the Middle Ages. It's not a civic duty, it's a social status. To an extent, to be able to maintain the ability to have a horse, weapons, armor, etc., is a sign that you're wealthy. To train with them is time that you can spend away from field, having somebody else do that land labor for you, where those that would be called up, like in the English system, the feuds, they're connected to the land. They have to work, they have to bring in the crops, they have to make their living. And so they fight temporarily. These warrior elite are able to fight on a more full-time basis. They also usually have other responsibilities, such as deciding disputes on their land, maintaining some type of fortification for use during warfare, but collecting taxes, those type of responsibilities. But they can spend a lot more time training than those around them. Again, this is a time period where you'll see violence become morally and religiously justified. Baccarat goes into this a lot in his chapters, that Christian institutions began to absorb and sanctify the military ethos. Kings and lords claim to rule by the grace of God, and therefore when they're going to war, it's for the purposes of God. And you'll even see, obviously, crusades and later events that are sanctioned by the Pope at the highest level of medieval religious authority. They are granted his blessing. One of the things that I really want to hit on, and this goes back to where I was talking about the drill, in the Roman system, the soldiers are drilled. You could take a Roman citizen from the city of Rome who's not used to necessarily hard labor. They would do harder labor than we're used to today, but they're not the most physically fit. You could put them into the system and you could drill them to become a soldier, starting from kind of a scrawnier, non-martial person, and they could be taught to wear the armor, carry the shield, use the gladius appropriately, throw the pilum when they needed to, follow orders, and work within a system. They didn't all, and if you can't, they don't all have to be frontline soldiers. Again, the Roman army has that system of support and that system of logistics and engineering, and so a soldier that can't hack it on the front line could easily serve in the Roman military as part of the support train. It is rigorous drill that the Romans do. It is very physical drill that the Romans do, but it's not the same. When you get into these early medieval elites, warriors, you're looking at martial prowess, individual martial prowess. And so it's more akin to athletic training. Size, speed, strength, overall athleticism, quickness, hand-eye coordination, they're more important than they were in the Roman system. The linear formations and the deep square formations that the Romans could pull off, where drill came into play, are gone. Not that there are not shield walls, lines of battle, formations that happen, but they're, once contact is made, individual martial prowess becomes more important than the drill of the unit. And so think more about how MMA, modern day football, boxers, etc. are trained. The warfare loses the professionalism and it becomes more chaotic, more individualized. You're going to lose the systematic equipment that the Roman military had. Each soldier is going to bring what they have. Weapons are sometimes passed down, and they're within the family. Again, you get the named swords and the great heroes, but you lose your professionalism. And this time period is kind of a weird transition because the Romans drill. Later in the medieval ages, the English longbowmen would drill. The pikes that will come into play will drill. And then, of course, firearms drill. So you have this weird transitional time period where there's a lot of training rather than drilling. Think about the way knights are trained. Young squires, young boys learn from somebody older than them. They teach them the way of warfare. It's a much more individualized training, and so it's going to be a complete and total departure from the systematic drill of the Roman military, which is something that you might want to consider digging into further and finding good examples of when you're looking at your essays. So broader impacts of this. Again, Roman soldiers, they serve for a time period. When they're done, they return to civic life. These medieval warriors, they're going to live and die by the sword. They're always a warrior. You look at societies where warriors feel like they have to die with their sword in their hand. It even plays a part in modern historical fiction that there's honor to die with your sword in your hand. It appears in writings and TV shows now. That this idea has become very central to what we think of in that time period. When you lose the centralization of everything kind of spanning out from Rome on these road networks, yes, obviously the Romans had forts, they had systems of fortifications along the roads, but you lose that, and so now castles become the primary military structure, and those are very localized. It's what's within the land around them. Where the Roman system existed on roads, now it's what you can kind of get to within a day and a half ride of the castle. So everything shrinks again as far as the world and society. And the castle is now used to project power for the person who holds it. You also see the subjugation of peasants, where once a peasant in the Roman army could achieve status and serve and become a citizen soldier. Now, hang on, time out. You're the peasant. You work the land. You bring in the food. You support me while I protect you. And so you'll see a complete and total change in the systems that are at play here for society as well. You also get a much heavier involvement of the church, which, that ought to go kind of without saying, because the Roman system doesn't have a centralized church that the Christian medieval Europe will have, but the church does get involved. So, in conclusion, look at the difference between shared civic obligation, look at the difference of training versus drill, look at the difference of personal allegiance and religious involvement, and think about the consequences outside of just the military. I mean, obviously this course is military history, but militaries don't exist separate from the economic and political ramifications of the time period that they live in. The famous quote from Clausewitz, war is an extension of politics by other means, right? So, think about how that fits in. Think about the architecture that's going to come into play. Also kind of think about that idea of, is it a Dark Ages or is it just the beginning of the medieval time period? Do we really have a Dark Ages or not? Reminder, the assignment this week, 800 to 1,000 words, comparing the Roman and medieval systems. You want to look at organization and recruitment, relationship between the army and state, cultural and ideological justification for warfare, and the impact of military service, and then, of course, the preparedness of the army. So I'll be looking for those to come in this week. If you have questions, reminder that office hours are posted. You can email me those or schedule a meeting if you have specific questions. Thanks.